Thank you very much, and thank you for asking me to be here and share the stage with my distinguished colleagues. And I'm looking forward to sharing some thoughts on the free and not so free flow of books internationally. Before I start, I want to say that, at least provide a caveat that for most of these observations, I don't have the answers, and these are among some of the more egregious experiences that I've encountered. But I hope that my participation in this panel stimulates some discussion and ideas and gives you an idea of what an American importer of early European books encounters. And I have no doubt that it will, as every night during this Congress, after conversations with many of you present, I have come back to this talk to revise it or to add something to it. So thank you for that. We don't apply for licenses ourselves. We buy books from our colleagues overseas, or we successfully bid at auction and then rely on our colleagues and the auction houses to, when necessary, complete and submit the requisite paperwork, and then wait, often with the patience of saints, for the approval of the issuing body. Predominantly, this is for incunables, manuscripts, and books with valuable annotations that require this documentation, and as has been already discussed, this varies country to country. We are then often at the mercy of the third-party shippers we all know, FedEx, UPS, DHL, to process the shipment and the paperwork in an expeditious and competent manner. What could go wrong, you might ask? I fear you already know quite well yourselves. So I will talk about a few of the recent uncomfortable misadventures with both colleagues and shippers to illustrate the kinds of things that come up and our encounters on, I wouldn't say a regular basis, but more often than I'd like. In 2018, we bought at auction in the UK an incunable printed in France, and before we bid, we inquired about the likelihood of the book receiving an export license, which to us seemed high. The interest in the book was in its importance and condition and not its rarity. We were told that the consignor was Spanish, and the book had entered the UK with a Spanish export license and would have no problem receiving British approval as well. It did not, and the book arrived at our office within a few weeks of the paperwork being processed. We cataloged the book, recording the title inscription, and began our census. Oddly, we noted that in ISTC, an institution in the same Spanish town as that in the title inscription, was recorded as a holder of this edition. So with 2 licenses under this copy's belt, we now had to undertake the process of inquiry with the British auction house and the Spanish institution to determine if the book had left Spain legally, which in fact it had not. When the book had been stolen is unknown, but it had never been deaccessioned from the library, and it was a salutary reminder that the job of the antiquarian bookseller is to place books where they are wanted, especially if this means returning them to where they may or may not be known to be missing. We returned the book to the auction house, which then handled the repatriation to its Spanish home since the 17th century. And as I stated before, this is an exception. This is not what we encounter all the time, but we were duly chastened to verify our own clear title to material regardless of the number of licenses or passports with which a book travels. More recently, at one of the virtual book fairs we've all come to know and love, I wrote off for an incunable that I saw. And I wrote to my colleague in Italy, and I stated explicitly that I could not buy this book without an export license. I was told this could be done, but would take a long time. But the dealer told me that the book had an English export license and could leave the EU properly. I told my colleague that if the book was in Italy, I would need to have an Italian license. An hour later, I received an update. He had forgotten that the book was actually still in London, so problem solved. Since the book was not in Italy, there would be no need for an export license. Within 10 minutes, I received an automated email from FedEx that the book was en route, and the package had just been picked up in Italy. I wrote to the dealer, and I said that he would need to recall the package, as I could not receive the Italian incunable without the proper paperwork. Months later, he informed me the license was ultimately denied. I would not, of course, do anything differently. Our clients expect this paperwork. During my 17 years in the trade, I have witnessed the slow but steady rise of provenance inquiries from major American institutions, sometimes even for books for which no license was required to leave its country. Some are satisfied with a provenance statement, such as, "We bought it from a well-known and respected ILAB-affiliated colleague in France or in the UK." Others will be fine as long as I can provide a FedEx bill showing that the book passed through U.S. Customs. Others can be more opaque about their policies. Of course, buying the book is all well and good, but its safe and timely arrival then to its destination cannot be understated. Accordingly, we rely on the carriers I mentioned earlier. My experiences are predominantly with FedEx and with UPS, and they are then entrusted to process this paperwork appropriately. I would note that for international shippers, neither seems to have many multilingual employees processing shipments to the U.S. I am contacted regularly to translate invoices, which always seems to me an odd request. Asking importers to functionally write their own invoices opens the door to creativity by the less than scrupulous. Even with emails larded with harmonized codes and antique declarations, I find that I am steadily in correspondence or on the telephone with shippers trying to explain to them what is in the box and what they need to do with it, namely, get it to us without opening it. 2 months ago, I had to contest a bill we received from UPS for nearly $3,000. The fees were custom duties imposed on the importation of photography equipment, wool, and iron. The package contained 8 printed books and 1 manuscript, but no cameras, sweaters, or fireplace screens. The package had originated at an auction house in Paris with an invoice in French, and somehow UPS had assigned the incorrect harmonized codes to 3 of the lots. I assume that this is because it was scanned and some words jumped out and they automatically assigned number to these. When I wrote UPS, I supplied all of the correct information, and of course, I was promptly asked for an invoice in English. When I modified the invoice to include simply the relevant information, I was told that my math was incorrect. I was importing not 9 works on paper, I was importing 774 books. 774. It took me a few minutes to understand what had happened, but I finally deduced that the professionals at UPS were adding together the auction house's lot numbers. That first we had purchased lot 15 in the sale, so they assumed we had 15 examples, and so on. Innovation at every turn. And these are the people we are asking to also process the licenses, so govern yourselves accordingly. Which brings me to my penultimate point, expense. All of this work, all of this error correction, we are paying for it, dramatically. Since 2020, I estimate that our cost to import and export materials has more than doubled. For nearly every package we send out, shipping is at our expense, and we are glad to provide that. But the loss of a postal option, which we basically lost because of COVID and the unreliability of the Postal Service, and our reliance on ever more expensive private carriers is indeed painful. And when somebody ships us a book at their expense, say with FedEx, we are charged $28 for FedEx simply to process that shipment. And that's every package. And I know that this represents an even greater expense to my colleagues here who have to apply for the licenses in their countries. All of this work takes time away from the business of books. Translating these invoices, correcting errors, hand-holding to get books from place to place. It represents time taken away from reading lists, cataloging, and quoting. But the even greater threat to our work is the temptation to act deceitfully. Ours is the business of a handshake, and we have the privilege of being honest. We stake the success of our book business on name and reputation, and these onerous regulations can have the opposite effect they are intended to. They create incentive for falsifying provenance, lying about a book's location, fudging numbers to slide under value thresholds. It puts trade and institutional buyers in potentially uncomfortable positions, and it's my hope that these observations provide a jumping-off point for candid and transparent discussions about how these positions can be avoided. Thank you.
Thank you very much.